everybody, we're going to start working on our Kimberbell Let It Snow pillow. I have one video before this where I show you how I pulled fabrics for this. I'm making my pillow in a different colorway. I've divided this up into 4 sections. Today we're going to work on the first 4 blocks, Let It, Snow, Cocoa, and the Mittens. And then I'll work on the snowman, the piece blocks, dimensional embellishments, and then work on finishing everything. I've prepped and cut all my fabric. Anything that needs fusible has the fusible attached to it, and I've got my batting ready. I'm going to pull out the blocks we're going to work on today. We'll go over hoop sizes and batting really quick. I made notes for the Let It block. It says Let It Snow, but it's actually just Let It. Can use a 5x7 hoop. The snow block is going to need a 9x12 hoop, and these are hoops that I have. You may have different size hoops that also fit, but I'm working with the hoops that I have. The Cocoa block, 5x7 or a 6x6 hoop, and the Mittens block, 5x7. The Let It block is just background quilting and embroidery. You want to cut your batting 5.5 by 3.5, and how I get the batting measurements is I look at the final cut size of the block and I add an inch. For the snow block, cut your batting 5.5 by 9.5. The Cocoa block needs a 5.5 inch square piece of batting, and the Mittens block needs a 5.5 by 7.5 piece of batting. You're also going to need some light mesh cutaway, Kimberbell paper tape. On my machine right now, I have the Schmetz Super Non-Stick 8012 needles. It's a relatively new needle. I'll just leave it on and work with this. A regular 75 by 11 embroidery needle will probably work just fine. Since I'm using a different colorway, I've pulled my own threads, and I'll go over my threads as I work through each block. Kimberbell had a good sale on their scissors not too long ago, so I picked up some new scissors. I've got everything in my embroidered snap tray. If you've never made the embroidered snap tray, I'll link that below. I have a video that shows you how to do that. We're going to start with the Let It block. I'm going to be using a 5x7 hoop. I have my light mesh cutaway loaded, hand tightened, screwdriver tightened. I am working with the background quilting, so we'll go through loading the quilting, loading the block, and the stitch out. Let's get started. I'm on a Baby Lock Meridian. My files are on USB. Let's pull up the background quilting first. We need KDQ 492 Winter 12, KDQ 492 Winter 12. The 2x4 vertical design. They have a nice picture of it here. You can see there's 2x4 designs, and I can tell by looking at the picture this one has the snowflake in the center, so we want that one. Going to hit set. Sounds like I'm going to have to close my window. Someone's doing some landscaping, sorry about that. Now we're going to add the embroidery file. I'm in Arizona and it's in the mid 60s right now, so I have the window open. We need the Let It file right here. Going to hit set. That's all I need. I'm ready to go. I have a neutral color thread on my machine. The first thing we're going to do is stitch out a batting placement line. If this is your first Kimberbell project, I'm going to go step by step through the blocks, and then as we progress through the project, things that are repetitive, I'll start to set the music and move through a little bit faster. But we'll go through this one step by step. So make sure you have a neutral thread, and we're going to stitch out the batting placement line. To cover the placement line with your batting, and I am using Kimberbell project batting for this project. I have a little piece of paper tape there to hold it in place. Once you've got that covered, you're going to stitch the tack down. Go ahead and remove that piece of tape. You can reuse your tape. I'll use it until it just doesn't stick anymore. And then we want to cut away the batting that's outside the line. I like to use the curved applique scissors for that. If you accidentally cut the stitch line, don't panic because we're going to be covering this with fabric. You'll never know. If you ever accidentally cut your stabilizer, take a piece of paper tape, put it up underneath, press down, make sure it's really stuck on there, and then just keep on going. Going to go ahead and trim away the extra batting. Once that's trimmed away, you're going to stitch the fabric placement line. You want to grab your background fabric. I'm working with Fairy Frost fabrics. They're by Michael Miller. I pulled pinks and purples from the Rose Quartz and the Amethyst. I think it's Amethyst Dreams. I'll link it below. A couple of different bundles. They are still available. Very shimmery, very shiny, but it doesn't rub off like glitter. We're going to stitch our fabric tack down line. Again, make sure you completely cover that placement line. Once the tack down has stitched, we're going to move on to our background quilting. We're also going to use this line later for trimming, so if you're watching this before you're making your blocks, and you think that the neutral thread might be kind of hard to see with your fabrics, you can switch it to a color that will be easier to see for trimming because you're going to trim right on those lines. For my background quilting, I pulled this color of Floriani thread. I think that's going to look good on this fabric. I think you'll be able to see it, but it won't stand out too much. I'm going to put this on my machine and then we'll stitch out the background quilting. Background quilting is done. That color came out great. Let's go look at our screen for a moment. You can see the next thing on this screen is another box. The embroidery file is designed to be used with or without the background quilting. You have the option to just do the embroidery alone. This would be a fabric placement, a fabric tack down, and then the words "let it." We've already done the fabric placement and tack down, so we're going to skip through these. Your machine should have a needle minus plus. You can go by individual stitches, tens, hundreds, thousands, at least on my machine. These buttons here will completely skip this color, a whole step. So we don't need that box. We don't need that box. That's what we need. I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to switch to this color purple to stitch out the words "let it." Got the purple thread loaded. Let's stitch out the words "let it." I had a thread break. I'm going to want to back up my machine. I've already rethreaded, but I can tell that some of the stitching on the little curve at the top of the T doesn't look quite right. So I'm going to back that up. I'm going to start right about there. This block is done. We can take it off our machine and set it aside. We'll trim all of our blocks at the end. Next, we're going to stitch the snow block. We'll be working with some applique. We just finished the "let it" block. You can hit OK. It's telling me my machine's going to move, and I'm going to hit the home button. It asks you if you want to cancel the current pattern, and we do. We're going to bring up a new pattern. Let's bring up the snow block. For the background quilting, I need KDQ 492 Winter 12, and I need the 4x8 horizontal design. These all start with 2 by something. Let's move down. Here's the 4x8s, and I can tell by looking at the picture in the instructions I want this one. Looks good. Going to go ahead and hit set, and then we're going to add our snow block just like before. Hit the add key, and we'll bring up the embroidery block. We need the one that says snow right down here. Set. You really can't see it very well because it's using, see, that's a white thread. It's there though. We're ready to go. Right now I have the purple thread on my machine. I'm going to leave it because my background fabric for this block is purple. We're going to stitch out batting placement, batting tack down, fabric placement, and fabric tack down exactly like before, and I'll stop before we do the background quilting. We're ready to do the background quilting. I'm going to use that same silver color. I like the way it looked on the pink. We'll see how it looks on the purple. Background quilting is done. It's kind of hard to see on camera. The light is really reflecting the fairy frost. It looks really good. I'm going to switch to white thread. We're going to stitch out the snow placement line. I'm going to be using flannel for the word snow. I will use glitter vinyl on the hot cocoa cup, so I'll teach you how to use glitter vinyl when we get to that block. I can barely see it, but it's there. There's the S-N-O-W. Again, hard to see because of the light reflecting on the fairy frost. I'm using white flannel, and I did put fusible on the back because all we're going to do with this block is have a tack down and trim. It's what they call a raw, R-A-W, edge applique, so there's no finishing stitching, no satin stitch, no decorative stitch. I wanted to make sure my flannel didn't fuzz. I'm going to add a piece of tape to that, hold it in place, and I'm going to probably pull this off the machine and get it under better lighting and just double check. You want to make sure all your letters are covered. If you're using glitter vinyl for this step, make sure you've peeled off that top plastic coating before you stitch out the tack down lines. Let's go ahead and stitch out the tack down. This is all done. You need to trim everything outside of the letters. I'm going to use these snips for that, and I'm going to do this while we're working on the cocoa block. That block is going to have some background quilting, which takes some time, so while that's going, I can sit here and I can trim all of this, so you'll see this block again at the end. I have a 6x6 hoop I'll be using for the cocoa block. All of these have the light mesh cutaway. Let's load our files for our cocoa block. We need the KDQ 492 Winter 12 4x4 horizontal design. So there's two 4x4s. I'm looking at the picture in the instructions. It's this one. You can see on my machine, all I get is 4x4 win, 4x4 win. So one's horizontal, one's vertical, but I can't tell by the file name. But this is the picture that matches. Let's go ahead and set that. And then we need to bring up the cup of cocoa right here. Set. We're ready to go. I have a neutral thread back on my machine. I'm going to move through the beginning steps, set to music, batting placement, batting tack down, trim your batting, fabric placement, fabric tack down, and then the quilting. The quilting, I'm going to continue using this color, the nice silvery gray color. Background quilting is done. We're going to stitch out our cup next. We're going to start with the placement line for the cup. This is my cup fabric. I decided to go with the pale pink for this part of the project. This is a sim thread color S086. I'm going to switch to this and we're going to stitch the cup fabric placement line. The line is there somewhere. Here it is right here. You want to cover your placement line with your cup fabric. I'm going to use tape. Definitely going to double check, make sure I've got my fabric covering that placement line. We're going to stitch the cup tack down line. The tack down line has stitched. If you taped it, remove your tape and then trim everything outside the tack down line. We're going to stitch the upper rim satin outline. That's going to go up and over. I pulled this color. I didn't realize that I need another color thread besides pink and purple. We're stitching the cocoa fill. It's going to go right in this little open space right there. I'm going to put that on the machine. Once you've stitched out your cocoa, switch back to whatever color you're using for the satin stitching. I forgot to turn on the camera for the satin stitching. Sorry about that. I'm still working on trimming this. I haven't got the inside of the O yet. Let's go to the next step on this block. We're going to work on the marshmallows next. I will be using this white glitter vinyl for the marshmallows, so I'm going to switch to my white thread and we're going to stitch out the marshmallow placement lines. The placement lines have stitched out. With your glitter vinyl, you want to peel off the plastic that's on top of it. See how that's clear plastic over the glitter vinyl? Throw this away. You don't want that. You don't want to accidentally use that. We want to make sure we cover all the little marshmallow lines with our glitter vinyl. Place that. I'm going to tape it and then I'm going to lift it and double check, make sure I've got everything covered. I do. We're going to stitch the marshmallow tack down lines. Once your tack down lines have stitched, you have to trim everything outside of the tack down lines, and then we need to heat set our vinyl. You want to cover it with the pressing cloth. If you don't have a pressing cloth, you can use a washcloth. I often use scrap cotton quilting fabric. I just double fold it, so I'll put that over it, and then you place your iron on top of it and hold it for about 15 to 20 seconds. My little marshmallows are trimmed. I did the heat setting process. I'm going to leave the white thread on my machine and we're going to stitch the little curls of steam. Little curls of steam have stitched. I pulled this bright dark pink for the center heart detail. This is a sim thread S077. That's going to go right in the center of my mug, and that's the last thing we need to stitch out for this block. We're all done with this block. I'm going to take my hoop off my machine and we're going to move on to the mittens block. We're going to start on the mittens block. I want to point this out to anybody so nobody gets confused. I got a little confused. All the little snowflakes in this picture are not background quilting. I believe this is the fabric they use. The background quilting we'll be using is right here. It's got mittens and a cup. So when you load your background quilting, it's not going to look like this. Let's start our mittens block. I have a 5x7 hoop on my machine. Stabilizer is loaded. Let's pull up the background quilting. We need the KDQ 491 Winter 11 4x6 design right here. Hit set, and then we're going to add our mittens block. We're ready to go. I have my white thread on my machine. I'm going to do the background quilting for this block in white. I have a white with dots as my background fabric, and I'd like to be able to see the quilting, but I don't necessarily want it to stand out because we're going to have some string detail with a little heart, and then we're going to have the mittens. I'll go ahead and move through everything, including the background quilting, and then I'll stop when we start working on the mittens. We're getting ready to do the mittens, and I missed this when I cut everything. We're going to use Flexi Foam with this. I do have some Flexi Foam. I'm going to go cut a piece 4 by 4.5. If you don't have Flexi Foam, you can use Soft and Stable. That's a by Annie's product. If you don't have that, you can use a double layer of the project batting. All this is going to do is give the mittens a little lift. I'll go cut my Flexi Foam and bring it back and show it to you. This is what Flexi Foam looks like. It's just the squishy foam product. If you don't have this and you don't have Soft and Stable, I think a double layer of the Kimberbell project batting will work just fine. I'm going to switch to my dark pink thread because this is the color of my mitten fabric, and we're going to stitch out the mittens base placement line. Grab your Flexi Foam or double layer of batting, whatever you're using. You definitely are going to want to tape this. Make sure you cover those placement lines. That looks good. I recommend sitting and watching your machine. You can see how much lift this has. You don't want to step away and find out that it all got wadded up and stuck under the needle. After your tack down line is stitched, trim everything outside of the tack down line. I've got that all trimmed. I accidentally cut my threads. If that happens, don't worry about it. We're covering this with fabric. The next thing we're going to stitch out is the mittens fabric placement line. Grab your mittens fabric, cover those placement lines, then you'll stitch the tack down and trim everything outside the tack down line. Same steps as before. Once you have these trimmed, switch your thread to whatever you want to use for the mittens string detail. I'm going to use this pale, it's like a pinkish purple color. The instructions say to switch to white thread. I'm going to leave this color on my machine. We're going to stitch the mittens details. The detail stitching is done. Something I find kind of interesting is it was really puffy with the Flexi Foam. Now it's almost flat because the detail stitching is so close together. It sort of flattened out the mitten block. We're going to do the fingertips and the cuff. I'm going to switch to the dark pink that I've been using. These are all done. If you don't have Flexi Foam, I don't think you're going to be missing very much. In fact, as I look at it, it might even look better without the Flexi Foam because it does puff a little bit, but this part, the fingertip area, is really flat. It almost looks like puffy and then super flat. But they're stitched out. They're going to look really good. Let's go over to the cutting table. We're going to trim all our blocks. It's time to trim our blocks. If I have the exact size orange pop ruler, I will trim it with an orange pop ruler. Otherwise, I'm going to use standard quilting rulers. We're going to start with the Let It block. We need to trim this to 4.5 by 2.5. I have a 2.5 inch wide ruler. I'll start with the 2.5 part. You can line it up right on the stitching. If you can't see this stitching on the front side, sometimes it's easier to see on the back side. Got that lined up. You're cutting right on that fabric tack down line. It's also called a trimming line. Let me see if I got that. It's not always smart to cut backwards. Hey, I did okay. And then 4.5. I have a 4.5 inch square ruler. If I have exact size rulers, I love to use them because then I know that I didn't make a mistake. Well, most of the time. Sometimes the ruler slips. I'm going to line up the top, make sure that that's straight. Cut one side and cut the other. There is our Let It block. Our snow block trims to 4.5 by 8.5. I have an 8.5 inch wide quilting ruler, so I'll do the 8.5 part first. I don't have a 4.5 inch wide ruler that's that size. So what I'm going to do is line up one side and cut right on that line. And then we'll spin it around and we'll find my 4.5 on my ruler. There we go. 4.5 by 8.5. There's the snow block. You can see how my trimming came out. Did the best I could. I have white flannel on here instead of glitter vinyl. You know everybody who sees this is going to want to touch it because it's soft and fuzzy. Let's do the cocoa block. The cocoa block trims to 4.5 inches square. I do have a 4.5 inch square orange pop ruler, and then I take the next size up and put it around that. That gives me space for my hands to hold the ruler. If you've never used these before, you line up that stitching line inside the orange pop ruler, like that. I like to use something as a paperweight to hold the side that I'm not cutting on. Right-handed people are going to cut on the left. Left-handed people will cut on the right. I'm right-handed. Your blade goes in the notch. Move your rotary cutter as far to the side as possible. All the way over to the left, and you go from the bottom to the top, up into that notch. Turn. I'm going to hold the ruler, move my paperweight, and go all the way around. And we'll cut these together since this is our first video. After that, depending on how they need to be cut, I might set the whole thing to music, although the next video I'm going to work on is the snowman. And it looks like there might be some tricky positioning and lining up and cutting with that one. Here's our cocoa block. The mitten block trims to 4.5 by 6.5, so we have that side with our rectangle set of orange pop rulers. There's a square set and a rectangle set. Do the same thing. Line up the trimming line inside of your ruler. Make sure it's as straight as you can get it. I'm going to grab that paperweight, trim all the way around. Let's get a look at all our blocks and talk about the next video. We just finished the first 4 blocks. Whenever this video pops up, the next video will probably come up not the next day, but the day after. I'll be working on the blocks on one day, and then I'll edit and post the next day. It's going to take me 4 sessions to complete everything, so please be patient as I post the videos. You can watch them as they come up or wait till all of them are posted and watch them all together. Let's talk about what we're going to do next time. For the next video, we're going to work on the snowman block. The snowman is put together in 3 pieces and then stitched together to make one big block. I'm going to make a small change to the snowman block and try to make it snow lady block. We'll see how it turns out, so make sure you're subscribed. You're not going to want to miss that. It'll either turn out fantastic or it'll be a total mess and something to laugh at. We'll work on that next time. Let's get a look at our blocks from today. Here's today's blocks. They look great together. You could actually sew these all together, make a little mini quilt door hanging placemat. Very cute looking, just like this. We did the Let It Snow, the cup of cocoa, and the mittens block. Next video will be the snowman, and then once we fully complete this project, I'm going to be moving on to the tiling scene from the Feeling Festive Bella box. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Any questions or comments, please leave them in the box below the video. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Have a great day. See you next time.